Can a single phone call rewrite a life? I am Llaya Whitaker Brooks, and I live in a narrow Boston row house on Myrtle Street, where gas lamps flicker like stubborn stars and ivy clings to brick as if it knows the secrets of Beacon Hill. My husband Daniel, with his tailored suits and vintage road bike parked like art in our hallway, thinks he brings modern energy to my old house, but the house has opinions of its own. This morning, as sunlight spills like warm honey across the oak floor, a stack of contractor estimates on the marble coffee table dares me to dream of a new kitchen. Shaker cabinets, quartz counters, though Daniel pushed them aside last night, saying we can't afford ambition. The radiator ticks, counting my thoughts, when my attorney Richard Hale calls from New York. His voice, steady as a ledger, tells me my great-aunt Margaret Whitaker has died, leaving me $100 million in a trust I can open today. The number hovers, a bird unsure whether to land or vanish, and I press my palm to the banister I sanded myself. It's cool wood, grounding me. Margaret was a New Yorker who knew doormen by name and museums by heart. At 12, she walked me through Central Park, her heels clicking, and told me to learn how money works so it could never define me. Her apartment, with its velvet sofa and river view, flashes in my mind, and I whisper, "Thank you," to the empty living room. The federal-style windows cut skinny rectangles of light, and I imagine telling Daniel tonight, popping cheap champagne, pouring it into mismatched glasses, promising to fix the roof, replace drafty windows, help his sister Renee with grad school, and donate to the South Boston shelter that runs out of coats by January. I want to say, in a voice I haven't used in years, that we are safe. But something holds me back, a crack in the foundation I can't yet name. I don't tell him this morning. Instead, I sit at the kitchen table, its peeling cabinet doors and slanted silverware drawer, a quiet rebellion against Daniel's dismissal of my dreams. I run Whitaker Wren, a consulting company with 1,000 employees between Boston and New York, though I've stepped back this past year during a rocky acquisition. Daniel calls what I do consulting, as if titles are vanity, and I've let it slide because peace feels easier than truth. Lately, though, I've been thinking about sitting him down, explaining the scale of my work, the midnight contract red lines, the payroll at dawn, the dominoes of decisions I balance. The inheritance could be the moment to say it all, to show him the weight I carry. I picture his face when he learns about the trust, the way surprise might soften his edges. The house hums, as if agreeing with my patience. I make a list, lemons for roast chicken, a notebook for next quarter's plans, a condolence card for Margaret's friend on the Upper West Side. Richard's email sits in a folder on the counter, a promise I'm not ready to touch. Myrtle Street smells of lilacs and bread from the Charles Street Bakery as I lock the front door and step into noon's brightness. At the Cambridge Street crosswalk, a couple holds hands, a boy chases a red ball on a string, and the walk signal blinks green. Then, a squeal of brakes splits the air. A delivery van barrels from my left, and the world tilts. Metal buckles, glass shatters into 1,000 bright shards. The airbag slams my chest, the seatbelt bites my shoulder. I taste copper, feel adrenaline's slow float. My phone vanishes. Richard's email slides to the floor mat, and I think absurdly of paper cuts. Voices shout, sirens braid with my heartbeat, and I cling to the thought of Myrtle Street's warm stone steps, promising myself I'll return to them. The paramedic with kind eyes leans in, his voice cutting through the haze, asking my name, and I say it clearly, Llaya Whitaker Brooks, because it feels like a lifeline pulled taut to shore. He asks where I live, and I murmur, Boston, Beacon Hill, Myrtle Street, as if naming the place will summon its sturdy brick and gas lamps to hold me steady. Who to call? He presses, and I say my friend Nora before Daniel, which surprises me in the moment but feels right, like an instinct buried under years of compromise. As they lift me onto the stretcher, the world sways, and my thoughts drift back to why I hadn't told Daniel about the inheritance yet, why I chose delay over disclosure this morning. It was more than patience. It was a quiet fear that the news might shatter the fragile balance we'd built, where he saw me as the dreamer with the old house, not the CEO steering a company through storms. In the ambulance, the ceiling lights blur into a row of pale moons, and the siren carves a path through the city, pushing traffic aside like it does on ordinary days but never feels possible until it happens. I think about Whitaker Wren, the company I founded after years of second jobs and tuna sandwiches, the one that grew from a small Boston office to 1,000 people across 2 cities. Daniel always called it consulting, a word that shrunk it to something casual, like a hobby I dabbled in between his real estate showings. He said titles were vanity, that real work didn't need a crown, and I let it go because arguing felt like adding weight to an already heavy load. But up close, being CEO meant redlining contracts at midnight, juggling payroll at dawn, and solving the endless math of whose needs came first, employees, clients, or the bottom line. The rhythm of that work was my favorite sound, a steady hum that drowned out doubts. During the rocky acquisition last year, I'd stepped back, returning quietly under my maiden name for a smooth transition. But Daniel never asked about the details, never wondered why I came home with shadows under my eyes. As the paramedic checks my vitals, his gloved hands gentle, I envision what the money could mean. Not just for the house, with its creaky floorboards and drafty windows, but for us. We could rebuild the kitchen without debt hovering like a storm cloud, install a farmhouse sink deep enough for holiday platters, and paint the walls a soft blue that catches the morning light. I picture helping Renee, Daniel's sister in Chicago, pay off her grad school loans so she could chase her dreams without the drag of interest rates. And the shelter in South Boston, I'd write a check for coats and beds, ensuring no one shivered through January because resources ran dry. The inheritance, sitting in that New York trust, felt like Aunt Margaret's final lesson. Money as a tool, not a tyrant. She taught me that in Central Park, her voice firm yet kind, promising that understanding finances meant freedom. I delayed telling Daniel because I wanted the moment to be perfect, at our table with coffee steaming and sunlight slanting in, where words could land soft and true. But now, with pain throbbing in my shoulder and ribs aching with each bump of the ambulance, that delay feels like a mercy or a mistake. I can't decide. New thoughts crowd in, ones I hadn't entertained before. What if Daniel's dismissal of my work was more than ignorance? What if it was a way to keep me small in his eyes? I recall the vintage road bike he parks in the hallway, treating it like a sculpture, while he teases me about the banister I varnished by hand, calling the house my pet project. The trust could change that, prove the scale of what I've built, but part of me wonders if he'd believe it, or if he'd wave it away like those contractor estimates. As the siren wails, I close my eyes against the floating dust in the light and dream of a life where safety isn't a revelation but a given, where I don't have to postpone truths to protect peace. The paramedic squeezes my hand, says we're almost there, and I nod. Tasting the copper again, holding on to the image of Myrtle Street waiting, its ivy stubborn as my resolve. The hospital doors swing open, and they wheel me in under fluorescent lights that hum like distant bees. The smell of lemon antiseptic hits me, mixed with the faint starch of old laundry, settling on my tongue as nurses swarm. Penelope, with her kind eyes and careful grace, adjusts a line and introduces herself, her voice a calm anchor in the chaos. She says I have a concussion, fractured clavicle, bruised ribs, lucky, she calls it, though I feel unhinged, like a door propped against a wall. The doctor speaks gently, prescribing rest, no screens, no noise, and Penelope tilts the blinds so a stripe of morning light falls across the bed, dust drifting lazy in its beam. I try to anchor myself. Myrtle Street, Beacon Hill, the United States of America, the house with its ivy and varnished banister. It waits, steady, and I tell myself I only need to cross these days to reach it. Around noon, Daniel arrives, coffee in hand he doesn't offer, standing at the bed's end with hands in pockets, eyes on the monitor like it's offended him. I say I'm glad he came. He mentions a showing in Back Bay. Can't stay long. His cedar cologne lingers, once comforting, now distant. I reach for his wrist. He flinches, asks about forms that might cost money. Insurance will cover, I assure him, my voice small. He leaves after 5 minutes, and Penelope watches the door, asks if I need pain relief. I say fine, though I'm not. People like me say fine out of habit. She folds the blanket with care, tells me to rest, and I listen to the hallway. Cartwheels, soft questions, distant laughter like a radio in another room. In the quiet, my mind circles back to the delay, to why I ran those errands instead of calling Daniel right away. The lemons for chicken, the notebook for plans, the card for Margaret's friend, They were small acts of normalcy, a way to hold the enormity of the inheritance at arm's length. I envisioned a kitchen smelling of Sunday roasts during hard weeks, a table for contracts and salt shakers alike. But deeper, it was about control, about not letting the money rush in and wash away the life I'd built with sweat and second jobs. Daniel moved in later with his suits and bike, claiming he modernized the place. But the mortgage was mine, the vision mine. Postponing felt like care, like keeping the door ajar. Now in this bed, with tubes tugging and pain pulsing, I wonder if that caution saved me from sharing too soon with someone who might not see the gift for what it is. The light shifts, and I exhale, letting the world soften, grateful for the house's hum that echoes in my memory, agreeing with my choices even as the accident rewrites them. The gurney rattles through the hospital doors, and the fluorescent lights above stab like needles, each flicker pulling me further from the blur of the crash. The air smells of antiseptic and starch, and I cling to the paramedic's question. My name, Llaya Whitaker Brooks, a rope tying me to Myrtle Street, where the ivy grips brick and gas lamps glow soft at dusk. My shoulder throbs, ribs ache with each breath, and the world feels like it's tilting again. As if the delivery van's impact still ripples through me. In the ambulance, I'd thought of the house, its warm steps, and Aunt Margaret's velvet sofa, her voice urging me to learn money so it couldn't own me. Now as nurses swarm, Penelope's calm hands adjust tubes, her eyes kind as she says I'm lucky. Concussion, fractured clavicle, bruised ribs but alive. Lucky feels like a word from someone else's story. The crash replays in fragments, the squeal of brakes, the van's blur from my left, the glass bursting into 1,000 bright shards like startled birds. I was crossing Cambridge Street, the walk signal green, a boy chasing a red ball nearby, when metal crumpled and the airbag hit like a fist. My phone flew, Richard's email slid to the floor mat, and I thought of paper cuts, absurd in the chaos. Voices shouted, sirens wailed, braiding with my heartbeat until I couldn't tell them apart. I'd whispered Boston to the paramedic, a promise to the city, to the house waiting with its creaky floorboards and stubborn ivy. Now, in the emergency room, Penelope tilts the blinds, letting a stripe of morning light fall across the bed, dust drifting like snow, too tired to land. I try to anchor myself. Myrtle Street, Beacon Hill, the United States of America. The house with its federal-style windows and the banister I sanded by hand. I picture its quiet rooms, the floorboard near the stove that creaks when stepped on, and tell myself it's waiting, steady as brick. But pain pulls me back, a dull throb keeping time with my pulse. The doctor, voice gentle, says rest, no screens, no noise for days. I nod, tasting copper, feeling unhinged, like a door leaning against a wall. Nora arrives before noon, her sneakers squeaking, carrying a tote stuffed with snacks I won't eat and peonies wrapped in brown paper. Her face holds light, the kind friends carry when they're ready to haul you over rough ground. She kisses my forehead, sets her bag down with a thump, and promises to stay, to call my office, to handle what I can't. I ask her not to call Daniel yet, unsure why, but it feels like protecting something fragile, a thread I'm not ready to cut. Nora talks of small things, lemon bars at the Charles Street coffee shop, the radiator's midnight silence, building a ladder out of shock with each word. I tell her my head pounds, but we make a list of shows to watch when it doesn't. She curls up in the recliner, book in hand, and falls asleep, trusting me to breathe on my own. The hospital hums, carts rolling, voices murmuring down the hall. I think of the errands I'd planned. Lemons, a notebook, a card for Margaret's friend. The inheritance sits untouched, a number too large for this sterile room. I'd pictured telling Daniel over coffee, sunlight spilling across our table, saying we could fix the roof, help Renee, give to the shelter. But the crash has cracked that vision. And I wonder if the delay was intuition, a whisper from the house itself. Outside, rain begins, a rumor tapping the windows, then a steady conversation with the glass. It speaks for me, filling the silence I can't. I draft a speech for Daniel, imagining the kitchen with new cabinets, a farmhouse sink, a table for contracts and dinners. I'd tell him the trust is real, that Margaret's gift could rebuild our life without fear. I imagine him softened, admitting fear made him sharp, asking for a chance. I fall asleep to the rain's rhythm, dreaming of Myrtle Street's oak floors, the light moving like quiet water. The van's impact echoes, but so does the house's hum, promising it will hold me when I return. I wake to the rain's end, the sky a washed blue, and Penelope resetting my sling saying, "Scans look good." Nora yawns, offers a granola bar I take to prove I'm here. The crash has shifted something, and I feel the weight of truths I haven't spoken, truths the house already knows. By midday, the hospital room feels like a pause in time. The stripe of light from the blinds lengthening across the bed as if measuring my progress. Nora sits beside me, her tote bag spilling wrappers from snacks she insists I try. Her presence a steady anchor in the fog of pain meds and concussion haze. She tells me she'll stay the night in the recliner, that she'll call Whitaker Wren to say I need a week off, her voice firm yet soft, like she knows how to hold space for healing without crowding it. I nod, the sling pulling at my shoulder, and we talk of small things, the new lemon bars at the bakery, the way the radiator has stopped knocking, to build a bridge over the shock. The crash has indeed shifted something, making the unspoken truths feel heavier, like stones in my pocket. But Nora's companionship lightens them, reminding me that some weights are shared. Penelope comes in to check the IV. Her movements graceful, folding the blanket with the care of someone who has seen too many midnights in these rooms. She asks about pain, adjusts the monitor's hum, and her eyes hold a quiet wisdom, as if she's a guardian of stories like mine. I think of Aunt Margaret, again, her apartment's river view, the velvet sofa where she taught me about compounding interest and self-worth. And the inheritance feels closer now, a bird circling lower. I hadn't told Nora yet, the number too vast for this bed with its tubes and beeps, but her being here makes me want to, makes me believe in futures beyond this sling and bruised ribs. The house on Myrtle Street waits, its oak floors ready for my steps, and I picture returning there, the banister warm under my palm, the light like honey. As the afternoon fades, the room's edges soften, and I doze, dreaming of the kitchen renovation. Warm white shaker cabinets, a long farmhouse sink, a table where work and life could coexist without apology. I wake to Nora reading her book, her breathing even, and gratitude wells up, clean and sharp. She's always been good at letting me keep my illusions until I'm ready to set them down. Never pushing, just present. We laugh quietly about a show we watched last month. The plot twists absurd, and it feels like reclaiming normalcy, piece by piece. The rain from last night has left the air fresh, seeping through the cracked window, smelling of washed streets and possibility. I think about Daniel's brief visit earlier, his flinch when I reached for him, his question about costs like I was a burden rather than a partner. It stings, but Nora's support dulls the edge, her resolve a mirror for my own. Evening light flattens the room, turning everything to quiet shadows, and Penelope dims the overheads, the machine beside me humming slower, as if coaxing me to follow its lead. Daniel returns alone, closing the door with 2 fingers, not sitting, looking at me like a cracked tile he doesn't want to fix. He stands at the bed's end, hands in pockets again, his cedar cologne mixing with the antiseptic, a reminder of what once felt like home. I ask how his day went. He says busy, then very calmly tells me he cannot afford to support a freeloading wife, that now I have an excuse to rest in bed, that he cannot bear an ill-favored freeloading wife anymore. The words land like a second accident, the same disbelief, the same float of shock in a room that counts heartbeats. I feel the tilt, the buckle, but this time it's inside. No metal or glass, just the shattering of illusions I'd held too long. I try to tell him about the inheritance, the trust in New York, Aunt Margaret's gift of $100 million, the number hanging in the air like a lifeline. I say it clearly, waiting for the world to right itself, for his face to soften with understanding. He waves it away with a flick of his fingers, calls it dramatic, says if I had a real job we wouldn't be in this mess, heal fast because he's out of patience. He turns, the door clicks shut like a period on a sentence I didn't author, and the room settles into silence, the blinds like ladder rungs I climb with my eyes until the ceiling blurs. Penelope enters, pulls a chair close, sits without words, letting the quiet be a blanket. When she speaks, it's the quietest truth. You can be lucky to be alive and unlucky to be loved by the wrong person. That's not a contradiction. I cry then, a stream without noise, and she hands me a tissue, goes about her tasks with dignity, squeezing my hand before leaving. Saying call if I need a voice. The machine hums indifferent, faithful, and at dawn Richard calls, his voice grounding as he offers to fly up with papers. I tell him wait 2 days, I want to stand when I sign. Nora wakes, stretches, brings awful coffee she swears is good, her resolve brightening the room. We talk more about the office rhythm I miss, the team in New York and Boston, and I feel the arc of healing begin, supported by her unwavering friendship. The house hums in my mind, agreeing, it's ivy stubborn as the strength I'm finding here, in this bed, amid the beeps and kind eyes. By mid-morning, the light pours in pale, and I practice holding a pen, the sling tugging, determined not to tremble when the moment comes. The truths are surfacing, and with Nora's support, Penelope's care, they feel manageable, like steps back to Myrtle Street. 2 days pass in the hospital like slow breaths, the room a cocoon of beeps and soft footsteps, and I practice signing my name with my bandaged hand, the pen steadying as my resolve does. Penelope tilts the blinds each morning, letting pale Boston lights spill across the bed, dust motes dancing in its path, and Nora brings coffee that's more warmth than taste, her presence a reminder that healing comes in layers. Richard has promised to arrive with the trust papers, and I want to stand when he does. To meet the moment on my feet, though the sling tugs and my ribs protest with every shift. The truths are no longer circling but landing, heavy yet liberating, and I feel the house on Myrtle Street calling, its ivy whispering patience. A knock comes, and I expect Nora with gossip or Penelope with meds, but Daniel steps in, a woman close behind him, their shoulders nearly brushing like they've shared more than space. She's tall, posture deliberate, dark hair in a neat knot, a thin diamond band catching the light as she moves. She glances at my face briefly, then away as if burned, while Daniel smiles that cheap open-house charm, the one for buyers he doesn't respect. He says he's here to check on me, then casually introduces her as his new wife, the words dropping like a misplaced key in the quiet room. Penelope freezes by the monitor, the green line lifting and settling unmoved, my body answering before my mind can. The woman's eyes widen suddenly, hand flying to her mouth as she steps back, whispering, "Oh no," loud enough for the doorway. She blinks, shakes her head, and says she's Sophie Marlowe from Whitaker Wren, that I'm her CEO, Miss Whitaker, Miss Brooks. And we met once in Boston after the acquisition, when I spoke about the new product division and the New York team. She's a project manager on the harbor team, had no idea Daniel was my husband. Daniel laughs short like a cough, says no way. She's kidding, but Sophie shakes her head harder, a strand of hair loosening. She's not kidding, she insists. We get company letters signed by me. I run town halls in Boston and New York. She reports to a director who reports to me. If I'm not her CEO, who is? The room tilts again, not from the crash but from exposure, the secrets I've kept for peace unraveling in this sterile space. Daniel never came to company events, never listened to my days, called my work freelance marketing, said titles were vanity without crowns. I used my maiden name during the transition for clean paperwork and quiet building, but it created distance I didn't plan, letting him shrink what I'd built. Now, Sophie's recognition lays it bare, her pity for Daniel, the kind women save for men who misread the map. A soft knock interrupts, and Richard slips in, gray suit crisp, leather folder under his arm, taking the room in with one glance, counting exits without moving. He addresses me as Miss Whitaker, sets the folder on the tray, says the trust from the Whitaker estate is ready. Upon signing, $100 million transfers to my control per the terms. Would I like them read aloud? Silence folds thick, the monitor whispering, Daniel's mouth opening then closing, looking to Sophie for an explanation she won't give. Her cheeks pale like paper, and she whispers sorry. She didn't know he was my husband, would never. Penelope shifts closer to the bed, hand near the call button, a subtle fence against intrusion, her nurse's instinct 2 steps ahead. Daniel tries to smooth it. Voice like basement mold discovery. Let's not make a spectacle, Llaya. You could have told me about this little inheritance. Perhaps we'd handle things differently. Little inheritance hangs absurd, and Richard's flat tone responds, Mr. Brooks, details are confidential. For my client only. If you're no longer her spouse, your presence puzzles. If you are, introducing a new wife puzzles differently. Color climbs Daniel's neck, words starting then stopping as Sophie backs away further, eyes glassy with recalculations, the courthouse in Providence, the word husband in a Boston hospital. I meet her gaze, offer a soft landing. Sophie, you didn't do this to me. If you want water, Penelope can help. She's already moving. Guiding Sophie to the hall as Daniel reaches for her wrist. Sophie pulls away sharp, disappears. The room expands without her. Richard opening the folder, placing the pen in my left hand, saying we can do this now or wait, on my timing. I look at the signature line. Llaya Margaret Whitaker Brooks, the W a hinge between lives. The company builder in Boston, the girl on Margaret's sofa learning money's language. I sign, the W like a mountain ridge I've climbed, the air shifting subtle like sealing a drafty window. No fanfare, just quiet certainty. Daniel clears his throat, stretches the word so into strategy, suggests private talk, an arrangement suiting us both. No, I say, complete and calm. You said you couldn't bear an ill wife, found a new one fast, came to mock, learned who I am instead. That's the only arrangement here. Penelope stands present, Richard with folder like a paper shield. Daniel scans us, power gone, tries one more. You're dramatic, Llaya, always are. I smile done, not bitter. Dramatic would be throwing the peony's vase. I keep still. Please leave, I say, and he does, shuffling embarrassed, shorter in the doorway, nearly colliding with Sophie returning with water. She steps around him, hands the cup to Penelope, stands by the window, deliberate distance on linoleum. Thank you, she says softly, for water and truth. I nod, the monitor humming patient, hallway carts rattling, a TV murmuring down the hall. The world resumes, but my story doesn't revert. I've signed, the number real, doors opening. Penelope straightens the blanket, a gesture undoing me, says rest. Richard handles the bank, she'll handle the hall, I handle myself. For the first time since the crash, I believe it, closing eyes to see Myrtle Street steady, courage sitting bedside, staying. Steps through the door, a woman trailing so close their shoulders nearly touch, her tall frame cutting a deliberate silhouette against the hospital room's pale light. Her dark hair is knotted neatly, a diamond band flashing as she moves, her glance at my face brief, skittish, like touching a hot stove. Daniel's smile is cheap, the kind he uses at open houses to charm without effort, and he says he's here to check on me, then introduces her as his new wife. The words landing like a dropped glass in the quiet. Penelope stills by the monitor, its green line rising and falling, my body speaking when my mind reels. The woman's eyes snap wide, hand to mouth, stepping back as she whispers, "Oh no," loud enough for the doorway. She blinks, shakes her head, says she's Sophie Marlowe from Whitaker Wren, that I'm her CEO. Ms. Whitaker, Ms. Brooks. We met once in Boston after the acquisition, when I spoke about the product division and New York team. She's on the harbor team, had no idea Daniel was my husband. Daniel laughs, a short cough, says she's kidding, no way, but Sophie's head shakes harder, a strand of hair slipping loose. She's not kidding, she insists. Company letters carry my signature. I run town halls in Boston and New York. She reports to a director who reports to me. If I'm not her CEO, who is? The room tilts, not from the crash but from truth breaking open, the distance I'd kept for peace collapsing in this sterile space. Daniel never attended company events, never heard my days, called my work freelance marketing, said titles were vanity, no crowns needed. I used my maiden name for the transition, wanting clean paperwork, quiet building, but it hid the scale of Whitaker Wren, 1,000 employees strong, from him. Sophie's recognition shifts the air, her pity for Daniel sharp, reserved for men who misread the world. A soft knock saves him from answering, and Richard slips in, gray suit crisp, leather folder tucked under his arm, scanning the room with a lawyer's glance that counts exits without moving. He calls me Miss Whitaker, sets the folder on the tray, says the Whitaker Estate Trust is ready. $100 million transfers upon my signature, terms as discussed. Would I like them read aloud? Silence thickens, the monitor's hum softening, Daniel's mouth opening then closing, looking to Sophie for an explanation she won't offer. Her cheeks pale, and she whispers sorry. She didn't know he was my husband, would never. Penelope edges closer, hand near the call button, a quiet fence, her nurse's instinct anticipating need. Daniel tries again, voice like smoothing over basement mold. Let's not make a spectacle, Llaya. You could have told me about this little inheritance. We'd have handled things differently. Little inheritance lands like a bad joke, and Richard answers, tone flat as the Charles River on a still day. Mr. Brooks, details are confidential, for my client only. If you're no longer her spouse, your presence puzzles. If you are, introducing a new wife puzzles differently. Color rises in Daniel's neck, words starting then stopping as Sophie steps back, eyes glassy with fast math. Providence Courthouse, husband in a Boston hospital. I meet her gaze, offer softness. Sophie, you didn't do this to me. If you need water, Penelope can help. She's already moving, guiding Sophie to the hall as Daniel reaches for her wrist. Sophie pulls away, sharp, vanishes. The room feels larger. Richard opening the folder, placing the pen in my left hand, saying, "We can do this now, or wait, my timing." I study the signature line, Llaya Margaret Whitaker Brooks, the W a hinge between the CEO in Boston and the girl on Margaret's velvet sofa, learning money's language. I sign, the W a ridge I've climbed, the air shifting, subtle as a sealed window ending a draft. No music, just quiet certainty. Daniel clears his throat, stretches so into strategy, suggests private talk, an arrangement suiting us both. No, I say, calm, complete. You said you couldn't bear an ill wife, found a new one fast, came to mock, learned who I am. That's the only arrangement here. Penelope stands closer, present, Richard with folder like a paper shield. Daniel scans us, power gone, tries one last door. You're dramatic, Llaya, always are. I smile, done, not bitter. Dramatic would be throwing the peony vase. I stay still. Please leave, I say, and he shuffles out, shorter in the doorway, nearly colliding with Sophie returning with water. She steps around him, hands the cup to Penelope, stands by the window, deliberate distance on linoleum. Thank you, she says, for water and truth. I nod, the monitor humming steady, hallway carts rattling, a TV murmuring a game show. The world resumes, but my story doesn't revert. The signature makes the number real. Doors opening. Penelope adjusts the blanket. A gesture that undoes me, says rest. Richard handles the bank, she'll handle the hall, I handle myself. I believe her, closing eyes to see Myrtle Street's brick, courage sitting bedside, staying. Nora returns, coffee in hand, sensing the shift, and we talk softly about the trust, her eyes wide but warm, like she's always known I'd carry this weight. I think of Margaret's lessons, how she'd smile at this moment, her laugh crossing a crowded room. The house waits, its ivy stubborn, and I know I'll return, not just to its rooms but to a self I've reclaimed, stronger than the crash, sharper than Daniel's words. The hospital bed feels less like a cage now, the sling a reminder of healing rather than restraint. And as Penelope wheels me to the curb 2 days later, the Boston morning bites with a crisp edge, promising autumn. Nora's old Volvo idles under the Cambridge Street awning. Passenger door popped open like she's waited her whole life for this kindness. We're meant to go straight to Myrtle Street, but I ask her to detour to the financial district, where Richard keeps an office in a brick building with windows that let Boston dream it's all glass and river. The conference room smells of polished walnut and coffee, and Richard meets us with a carafe of water on a tray, a promise of clarity. I tell him everything. Daniel's new wife, Sophie's shock, the trust's weight, and he takes notes with a court reporter's calm, calling a New York family attorney as rain streaks the windows in long, forgiving strokes. We file for divorce that afternoon, the prenup I insisted on years ago doing its quiet work, protecting the house, my company, and now the Whitaker Trust. Daniel once called the prenup unromantic. I said romance shouldn't fear clarity, and now that clarity cuts clean, leaving his courthouse sprint in Providence a messy footnote for him, not me. I sign the papers. Richard slides across the table, my hands steadier with each stroke, the W in Whitaker a ridge I've scaled. Home greets me like a friend who's held its breath, the kitchen floor creaking near the stove, familiar as a heartbeat. I lean on the marble counter, cool under my palms, and cry. Not for Daniel, but because I can, because Penelope's truth about luck and love holds true. The house doesn't ask what's next. It stands, sturdy, its ivy clinging like my resolve. Contractors arrive the next week, scaffolding rising like an orchestra tuning up. Old windows come out, the roof gets patched, and I choose warm white shaker cabinets, a farmhouse sink deep enough for dreams. I write a check for $82,000 to cover it all, pay off the mortgage in full, and hold the deed like a newborn. Its weight certain, final. The dining room gets a shaker table, simple and steady, a place for decisions to rest without wobbling. The trust's funds ripple outward. I allocate $10 million for Whitaker Wren's employees, a bonus pool split across Boston and New York. A thank you for their rhythm that's always been my favorite sound. Another $10 million seeds a fund for women-led companies in the US and UK, a nod to Margaret's lessons about wealth as a canvas. I send $2 million to the South Boston shelter for beds, heat, coats, and $1 million to a Roxbury literacy program that opens life's early chapters wide. These aren't saintly acts, just responsibilities to the place that holds me. At Whitaker Wren, HR flags a potential conflict with Sophie. I recuse myself from her personnel decisions, asking general counsel to oversee, and write her a note saying she didn't cause this, offering coffee at a Charles Street cafe with crooked chairs. She comes, hands shaking, apologizes thrice before sitting. I say belief doesn't need her pain, and we talk small things, coffee bitter, cinnamon generous, until she cries quietly, admitting she signed papers in Providence without knowing the timeline made it a performance, not a marriage. Daniel tries old tricks, unanswered calls, texts sliding from apology to revision, an email labeled misunderstanding like it could rearrange reality. He asks to meet at a Back Bay hotel bar, then on our stoop, which he once wanted titled in his name. I don't meet him. Richard forwards the final decree and a polite request for the spare key. When Daniel brings it in a plastic envelope, I'm on the stairs, hand on the varnished banister, and he looks at the new windows. The door's clean lines, baffled, like gravity's caught him. You could have told me, he says. You could have listened, I reply, and he drops the envelope on the hall table, silence finishing the work. The house hums, agreeing, its light moving across the oak like quiet water. I think of Margaret, her velvet sofa, her laugh crossing rooms, and how she'd approve of this clarity. Nora calls, says she's bringing lemon tart for dinner, and I smile, knowing the table will hold us, no wobble, no fear. The trust is mine, the house is mine, and the truths I've spoken are building something new, steady as brick, ready for winter. The new kitchen smells of fresh paint and possibility, its warm white shaker cabinets catching the morning light that slides across the oak floor like a promise kept. I stand at the farmhouse sink, deep enough to swallow a stack of dishes and dry a glass, setting it on the shelf with a soft clink that feels like a period at the end of a long sentence. Nora arrives for dinner, a lemon tart from the Charles Street bakery tucked under her arm, its scent sharp and sweet, while Richard brings a bottle of champagne with a label that knows its worth. We sit at the shaker table, steady under our plates, and toast Aunt Margaret, roofs that don't leak, and friends who carry blankets through storms inside your chest. My grandmother's gold ring rests beside my water glass, a quiet nod to the women in my family who turned resolve into wealth of spirit. The house hums, its new windows silent in their frames, the banister warm under my palm as I climb the stairs later, the city settling into an ordinary autumn evening. Word travels fast at Whitaker Wren, the bonus pool sparking murmurs of gratitude in Boston and New York, the rhythm of our work stronger for it. Sophie's promotion to senior project manager on the harbor team comes through, and her email arrives with a photo of an empty bookshelf in her new Cambridge apartment, a smile hiding in the frame's corner. She writes of a therapist who makes the floor feel solid, and I reply, wishing her peace that matches the river's calm. I walk to work now, crossing the Longfellow Bridge as the Charles pretends to be glass, coffee from Charles Street warming my hands. I keep a coat in my office for slips to the water when meetings stack like dishes, the breeze lifting hair from my forehead, reminding me of Margaret's lessons by her river. I sent Penelope a postcard, thanking her for the quiet truth about luck and love, and she writes back, a note tucked in hospital stationery, saying she's glad I'm home. Mrs. Harold, my neighbor with the stubborn window sash, gets a new space heater before frost, paid for with a check that feels like paying forward Margaret's care. None of this makes me a saint, just responsible for the place that holds me. At the office, I prepare for tomorrow's town hall, imagining faces building something with me. Not for me, the difference of clarity I've earned. Daniel's last email sits unanswered, its subject, misunderstanding, a fiction I don't entertain. He wanted the house's title once, thought his bike deserved the hallway. Now the deed is mine, the mortgage gone, the trust a tool I wield with purpose. I think of Margaret's velvet sofa, her books stacked like towers, and how she'd laugh at this table at the champagne bubbles rising in our glasses. The shelter in South Boston has coats for January. Roxbury's literacy program grows. The women-led fund plants seeds across 2 countries. In early autumn, I take the train to New York, meeting Richard and our new board chair in a glass building where the Hudson glints like a memory. I wear a navy suit, low heels for height without noise, and we move through agenda items with the confidence of people who've done hard things before breakfast. Afterward, I walk to the river, letting the wind lift my hair, mailing Penelope's postcard from a box near the park. Back in Boston, the house finds its rhythm, the light resting at the table's edge, the floorboard creaking near the stove. I stand at the sink one evening, after a day of product reviews and a well-timed joke from the New York team, listening to the city hum. My phone buzzes with a calendar alert for the town hall. Once a knot of nerves, now a chance to speak truths unhidden. I don't need Daniel's agreement to know my worth, nor anyone's tally to build with the trust. The house stands, the company grows, the city keeps its promise, and I, Llaya Whitaker Brooks, decide what comes next.